So polarities are unsolvable. They're not problems to solve. Rather, there are polarities to manage. And polarities are like inhaling and exhaling. That's one of the most primary examples of a polarity that I can give you. So you have to inhale and exhale. You have zero option to inhale or exhale, right? So that means that it is not a problem to solve. If somebody tells you you inhale too much, you have to exhale more, like, you're not going to win that. There's no problem to solve there. There's no such thing as from to. Instead, it is an and. You absolutely have to inhale and you have to exhale. They're unavoidable. Polarities are unsolvable and they're unavoidable. You cannot just do one thing in a polarity. Polarities are interdependent. They depend on each other, even though often we will be privileging our preference. The teaching is that they are unavoidable, they're indestructible. You can't destroy one of the other, and they're leverageable. You can actually, once you open your mind up and once we learn about polarities, we actually learn that you can leverage on them. In fact, we have to. We do have the option to alternate. Doing polarity management does not mean that you have to do 50-50 of both sides. That's a false belief. It would be a perfect world if we can do that. In fact, that is perhaps a perfect union that we're all wanting. But when you do manage polarities organizationally or individually in our personal lives even, we do get to alternate. So given a certain time in the problem, we do need to maybe shift a little bit more towards one polarity. But in polarities, here's the biggest teaching. If you get stuck in that one polarity, sooner or later, you will hit the downside of that preferred pole, which will then force you to go to the upside of the other pole. And the reason why we often have preferences in a polarity and the reason why we hold on to a preference is because we will probably really have a lot of fear about the downside of the non-preferred pole. That fear of the downside also causes us to tolerate more than we ought to our preferred pole. So those are just a couple of sort of common things that we see in polarities. Is everything a polarity? No, there are some things that are problems to solve. If my refrigerator has nothing in it, that's a problem to solve. There's no polarity. Do I go to the grocery store or, do I just hang out at home? That's not a polarity. If I want to live, I do need to solve the problem of going and getting some food from the grocery store. Okay, so there are some problems to solve. I want to give us a opportunity to actually spot polarity. So let's imagine somebody this is something a client of mine that actually said to me, that one of her team members had said, stop being such a doormat. I'd like for you to be confident, stand up for yourself and the team. Stop being such a doormat. I'd like for you to be confident, stand up for yourself and stand up for the team. When you hear something like that, what we tend to do is that, oh my God, I am such a doormat. I'm weak. I need to become strong. There is a hidden polarity there. And that polarity is, what is hidden here is that being a doormat is the downside of some polarity that you're not doing effectively, or you're neglecting at the expense of being confident. What do you think is the polarity here? When somebody tells you something like, stop being a doormat, I want you to be more confident. Start with the one that feels doormat and confident. Which of these feels less judgmental, more positive, or neutral? Go ahead and unmute yourself and just say, which of between
I think confidence.
confident, exactly. When we do polarity management, we want to try to get to positive attributes, or at the very least, keep them neutral. If there is a judgment about one of them being way better or way worse, that means we're either looking at the upside or the downside. So when someone says, stop being a doormat, stop being so timid and shy, that is I want you to start training. This is like in our listening lab, when we are learning to really sharpen our listening. Listen to the polarity there, spot the polarity there. Start with confidence. If confidence is one side of the polarity, then what do you think the other side ought to be or might be?
Humility.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen this really quickly. Here, as Cheryl said, it is humility. Okay, on the chat field, can you go ahead and put what are the healthy aspects of being confident? You have like 10 seconds. Go. Decisive. By being confident, you have power. Yes. You are effective. Finn, I think maybe you wanted to say leadership. Yeah. Jim said able to accomplish. You are influential. You can influence others, according to Phyllis. Yes. And then Jim also said tasks. You can get tasks done. And Helen says personal power. Very good. See how quickly, in just a matter of seconds, you can identify what is good about being on the top side of confidence. So I'm just going to put this here. Okay. On the other side, you have 10 seconds to put into the chat field what are the upsides of humility. Out of ego, there's openness, there's active listening, there is nobility, there's an open-mindedness. Yes, open to the opinions of others, absolutely. Compassionate, absolutely. So I'm just going to put 3 of mine here. You are approachable. You are measured and respectful in your action, and you're comfortable in letting others lead. Okay, now go ahead and put into the map. You have 10 seconds. Go ahead and put what happens when you are overly focused on being confident to the neglect of being practicing humility. Arrogant. Yeah, you miss some details. You will be inflexible. That's right. Go ahead and keep adding them. Cocky, yeah, you make a lot of mistakes and there's a lot of pride. Unapproachable, that's right. So here's a couple of things that I'm going to add here. Notice at the top A, being confident, you're seen as self-assured. But if you overdo your confidence thing, you will end up looking arrogant. You're quick and competent in action on the healthy aspect of confidence. If you do too much of that, if you're doing too much of trying to be competent and quick in your action, you will end up taking too many risks and making too many mistakes in your action, right? You're comfortable leading others. And if you only focus on leading others to the neglect of humility, you will end up dominating others and being too bossy, right? See how those 3 align, the top 3 now align also with the bottom 3. This is another way in which polarity maps get really specific. I'm just showing you some of these technicalities before we get into the pandemic effect. Now, can you take 10 seconds to put in the underside of humility? If you only focus on being humble and practicing humility, what would be the underbelly of that? What would be the loss in doing that? You become a doormat, that's right. Lack of impact. You're not being heard. You're easily pushed around. Resentment. That's right. So here's what I'm going to put. Loss of voice and center. Fearful. Here we go. So now you can see how when you are practicing the good thing about humility, if you're focused on being approachable to the neglect of being confident, you will become exploitable and timid. If you are always worried about being measured and respectful in your action, you might become afraid to take any action at all. And if you're comfortable in letting others lead to the neglect of leading others and being confident, you might then become a doormat and overly compliant. Right? Hopefully you can see how these are all sort of aligned. If you're seen as arrogant, then you can also end up being seen as timid. If you're taking too many risky actions, the other side is that you don't take any action at all. If you're dominating and bossy, the other side is that you're a doormat and you're overly compliant. And look at the fears. If your preference is to be approachable, then the reason why you resist being confident is because you probably have a fear about being seen as arrogant. If your focus is on being measured and respectful in action, then your fear about being confident is likely because you fear taking too many risks and making too many mistakes. If your focus is on about letting others lead as you practice humility, then your fear about being confident is likely because you're afraid of dominating others and being seen as bossy. So these arrows go diagonally, they align with one another, as well as horizontally, they align with others. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. So, but just for you to kind of get a sense of how these polarities actually end up working. We may not be able to get into that much detail as we get into kind of talking about the actual pandemic issues. Notice that if you want to be an effective leader, or effective as a leader, or effective in your own personal life, hopefully now you'll see that you can't just be humble and practicing humility. You also have to be confident. You can't just also be confident all the time, because if you're over focusing on it, you see now that you'll have to also practice humility. Nobody wants an ineffective leader. In order to be an effective leader or effective in your own life, you need both. That's the idea of the polarities, right? Now, I'm going to actually put you into small groups. Now you see how sort of polarities work. So for your small groups, I'm going to give you 15 minutes to discuss what interdependent values do you see in regards to the pandemic. Make sure that they're stated in the positive or neutral, right? So they're stated when as a team, when you're coming up with your polls, make sure that they're stated in the positive or neutral. Make sure to touch on fears of those who might prefer one poll over the other. Just pay attention to that. When you notice that you might have a preferred poll, and I want to tell you already, it is absolutely okay for us to have a preferred poll. I think the entire world currently has a preferred poll. All of us here, I'm sure, have a preferred poll. So let's just own it, okay? When you own your preferred poll, try to pay attention to what is it that you fear about the other poll. And can you also get a sense of what is it that you can assume, or perhaps just even take a guess at what do you think is the fear of the other poll, your less preferred poll. So let's do that, and I will bring you back in. I'm actually going to bring you back in 10 minutes. Here we go. All right, welcome back, everyone. Okay, now it's time to report to the big group what some of your groups came up with as polarities. So,
okay, thank you very much, everyone in our group. Mark, Jim, and Simone, and myself. So, one polarity, individual rights.
Mhm.
The other polarity, collective responsibilities.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Finn. So let's go to a different group. Who might like to say? Jolene? Yep.
Hi, our group, Stephanie and Andrew came up with, let me just refer back to this document. Okay, so scientific-based thinking versus belief/bias thinking.
Science and belief.
And let's see, Helen, Hardy, and Jen. I think, and please jump in, the rest of you, if I got this wrong, we were really struggling over terminology.
Okay, yeah.
But I think that what we were trying to get to was what Finn's group has expressed. Does that seem right to the rest of you? Yeah, collective rights and or individual rights and collective responsibility. Yeah.
Okay.
I had the pleasure of being with John and Eric, and we also spoke about the primacy of community and the primacy of the individual. We were also speaking about, we were having difficulty with the idea of safety and risk-taking, and how both of those became very, very mushy in the in the words and what each of those words meant. Safety versus risk, and so I don't think we were that clear on that, but it felt like there was something in that that needed to be addressed.
Okay. All right. It feels like risk taking. Maybe the terminology there might be being bold, being safe and being bold, perhaps. That and so yeah. Anyway, very good. Anybody else want to add anything that came up to you?
Eric and John, did I get that right?
Yeah, thanks, Phyllis. I mean, the safety risk-taking, one aspect I felt the conversation was about risk-taking in the sense that if you take risks in the pandemic context, you get into trouble. Legal, social trouble. Up against, just stick to the rules and regulations.
Yeah. Yeah, good. These are really good. And I think that many of you have captured. Oh, Eric, were you going to say something? Sorry, Eric. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think part of what was sticky about the safety and the risk taking or boldness was just between the different contexts, because there's that with respect to health, whether to take a vaccine or not take a vaccine, with respect to civil liberties and politics, and with respect to economy, because, you can hurt one. And so it's like all these multiple facets that, so I don't know how to put that into a map. That's, I guess, I'm curious.
We're literally talking about the fact that, in fact, in this topic or in any topic, really, there are multiple maps that we can come up with. And basically, you have each given several different polarities that could be turned into maps. We're going to, as a group, we're going to work with a map. Finn, were you going to say something?
Yes, I just want to acknowledge that a substantial awareness and effort was put into identifying and being inclusive as we set up the polarity.
Nice, very good, thank you. You were all being very good children. Good, so what Eric just said, in fact, are what we often refer to as themes. There are key themes that impact any polarity, any situation. So here's a couple of them that I wrote down here. So there's the issue of the polarity of health and economy. So let's talk a little bit about that. And if you expand on it, you'll see that we have a polarity of the health and economy of individuals, health and economy of a nation, health and economy globally, right? There are many ways we can think about it. Let me talk a little bit about health and economy. When I'm talking about the US here, and I know there are some of you who are not in the US, obviously, but this is probably common in many countries. When the Trump administration came into power, like many administrations come into power, there's a heavy emphasis on focusing on the economy. So the Trump administration comes into power and they're looking at where can we cut corners, where can we save money? We don't want to waste any money. So what is one thing? Because of economy, they got rid of something. What was it? Do you remember? Which really became a big deal when the pandemic came into being?
Yeah, they got rid of the Office of Pandemic Preparedness.
Yes, exactly, right? Never assumed, never thought that such a thing would happen under his administration, right? So what happened as an overfocus on the economy, what happened was then we went to the underbelly of not taking enough care or neglecting health. the Biden administration comes through, or you can also look at this in the sense of Governor Cuomo's actions in New York. He came from a perspective of feeling like we need coordinated efforts between the government, between the states, and that we're all doing something and that we're all doing the same thing, whether it is, do we have enough ventilators across the country or in our state of New York? We need coordinated, centralized attention on the health. So in some ways, what's happening in a little bit of a sense, politically speaking, there is a little bit more emphasis on the economy, or at least in the way that we saw at the start of the pandemic. Republicans were afraid. Their fear was that the economy would crash. And in some sense, Democrats, who perhaps in some sense have a little bit more of a postmodern approach to this, were concerned that the health of the nation will collapse and the health of the individuals will collapse. Everybody will die. You know? So you pay more attention to the economy, and then the other side, who cares about the economy? I mean, sorry, you pay too much attention or get stuck in at least your messaging sounding like it's only paying attention to health. Then the other side, the other polarity fears come alive, which is that, oh my God, we're losing our jobs, our businesses are going to hell. So these things are both happening. And then people are in a hurry to open up businesses and let's get back into having sports arenas opening up and rock concerts and restaurants. Let's open. Then there's a real issue of a lot of people getting sick. This is a disease that people can catch easily. So there are real deaths. In America, we're gonna catch up to 1 million deaths soon enough. So now I hope that you see that these, the well-meant efforts of both sides and also the undersides of both sides. You can also think about legal issues and loss of the land in the sense of rights and responsibilities, which is what several of you already came up with, right? And then there are cultural values. There are traditional and postmodern values that have come into effect here. There's the media also, alternative heterodox views and mainstream views. So some people are denying mainstream altogether and focusing only on the heterodox. Like I've taken part in certain other places, such as, for example, Rebel Wisdom, for example. Much of their emphasis and their fears are with mainstream, and their preferred pole is with the heterodox, the alternative views. And then the mainstream, like you watch CNN, for example, you almost never hear the heterodox. You don't hear the alternative views. So there's a real problem there too. So I really like all the polarities that you all came up with, and these are a couple that I captured. And what we are going to create as a whole, as a group here together, is what I also then call the centralized approach and the decentralized approach. And let me just tell you a little bit about what the centralized approach here, what I mean by that is that the centralized approach is generally what we mean when we're talking about responsibilities for the common good of the collective. The decentralized approach is generally in giving each state freedom to do as they please, as they wish is right for each state. The decentralized approach advocates for the individual freedoms and rights of individuals and different parts of the country or different states. The centralized approach is let's everybody get vaccinated, or let's everybody follow the rules of the CDC guidelines and not go to restaurants. Or the centralized approach is really around let's be responsible for the common good of the collective. So let's begin. So what I want each of you to do is let's start. By the way, another thing, when we do polarities, it doesn't really matter which side you start. So let's start with the upside of the centralized approach. Go ahead and put into the chat field what you see is the upside of the centralized approach, responsibilities for the common good of the collective. The responsibilities of the collective. Less deaths. Eradicating. Jim, let's hold off on eradicating. Let's talk about it a little bit in a bit. Fewer hospitalization, yes. I'm gonna say fewer, yeah. Go ahead and keep adding. Some structure within a hierarchy. I'm trying to understand that. Let me come back to that. Administratively easier. Control over key messages. That's a really good one. Yes. Complete view. Impact. Solutions. Protection of the more vulnerable. Very good. Yeah. One solution or a cohesive solution. Very good, everyone. Certainty, let me see, I'm trying to keep up. Certainty, less confusion, yes. Greater equality, greater equity, yes. Perhaps economies of scale. Okay, Jim, the only reason why I didn't put eradication here is I could put it. I just don't know if that is realistic, complete eradication of COVID. Not entirely sure about that. But I'm gonna just leave it here, or let's just say even greatly reducing spread of disease.
Well, it could be eradicated like Ebola has been sort of eradicated.
Not really, because it's still happening in Africa in some places, right?
Well, it's an ideal.
It's an ideal, yes.
New York Times is now saying that deer are carrying COVID viruses.
Yeah, and there have been some dogs as well. But yes, I mean, yeah, I am going to leave it there. Let's move to the upside. These are all really good, by the way, and let's come back to them. Let's move, take 15 seconds. Let's go ahead and put in the upsides of the decentralized approach, which is advocating for individual freedoms and rights. What's the value of that? Choices, yes. More options, alternatives, yes. Diversity of efforts. I'm trying to catch everything. And if I'm treating people as humans. How do you spell sovereign? I think that, let's see, I'm getting drawn. Sovereign individuals. Okay. Let's see, what am I missing? Focus and improvement of interpersonal communication. Flexibility in responsiveness, yes. Oops. Less bureaucracy. Very good, yes. One size does not fit all, indeed. I'm gonna actually add that to diversity of efforts. Yep. So the other way of saying that is also customized solutions. Protecting legal rights of the individual, absolutely. Yes, yes. Let's see, what did I miss? That's right, more adaptive to local conditions and environment. That is somewhat similar to what I said around customized solutions. Yep. People may know what's best for them. Yes, people can take individual decisions. Individual needs, treating people as human diversity. What did I miss? Follows the constitutional notion of a republic. Okay, Stephanie. Yeah. Choice, yeah. Avoid further erosion of freedoms and rights, yes. More options, alternatives, yes. I would say alternative options, yeah. Really good. Okay, let's pause there.
You already put that.
I'm sorry?
Number 3 and number 4 are the same. You already put that.
Yeah, I think I got it. Yeah. Very good, everyone. Let me see if I can. Okay. Good. Is this very tiny? Like, can you all at least to some degree see what's on this? Good enough? Okay. All right, now let's go to the downside of the centralized approach. And welcome, Levi. We please jump in. We are working on the map together, so please jump in with on the chat field. Okay, 15 seconds. Go ahead and put the downside of over-focusing on the centralized approach, meaning over-focusing on the responsibilities for the collective good or the common good, to the neglect of advocating for individual freedoms and rights. What would happen then? Overly cautious. Only one approach could fail bigly here. We have some nice Trumpian language here. Very good, Helen. Standardization is probably not, standardization is a good thing, or is a positive or neutral. So what would be the negative of that, Simone?
Yeah, it should be the opposite of
Fixation, maybe? Like you get fixated on a standardized solution.
Yeah,
so the standardization is actually a positive that we can actually put at the top here.
Okay.
Yeah. Standardized solutions on this side, customized solutions on the other side. So fixation of solutions. Confusion over message and meaning. Censorship of thoughtful conversation. I really like that. Yes. Ladies, censorship of thoughtful conversation. Tell me a little bit about confusion over message and meaning. There's a part of me that feels like that could go on both sides. Or Phyllis, can you say how you see that as a problem of the centralized approach?
That when it's like a top-down the message, you know, when it's a centralized approach with a top-down message, then the message can come out in a way that just is not understood in the same way by everybody.
Okay, so what? Okay, we may be able to better state it, but we can come back to that. Potential for revolt. Can you say more about that, Finn?
So when people feel they have nothing to lose because they've lost everything, then they escalate.
Okay. Loss of rights from Helen, big one, big one. Yep. Majority focus on solutions to the exclusion of the minority. Yep. Less creativity, absolutely. From Phyllis there. No control group. What did you mean by that, Simone? No control group.
Yeah, it's a huge debate here in Italy. I don't know if it makes sense.
No, that's okay.
As combined with the centralized approach now, since here in Italy, the government is talking about the mass vaccination as the only possible solution, which is not. There are some alternatives. Some have started to argue that you will not have any control group to know, you know, like in scientific research, you have no control group to have a comparison cause and effects.
I wish to add very personally for me. So I and members of my family recovered from COVID. We caught it, and we've been speaking with our provincial officials, our doctors. We're like, study us. We'll do it for free, and nobody's returning our calls. So we want to be a control group. We're asking to be a control group, and no one listens to us. No one lets us. Nothing.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Power held by, and Helen had this last one. Power held by people making money from the situation. All right.
That's it.
Excellent.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go. It's I mean, big pharma, right? Okay, let's go. So you have 15 seconds to put something into the downside of the decentralized approach. Too much chaos. Loss of structural cohesion. Yes. Can't care for everyone individually. Yep. I'm going to say can't keep offering customized solutions. People will fall through the cracks. Yes. Not enough guidance for people with fewer options for self-education. Yes, very good. I will add also no accountability. Lack of cohesive research on solutions. Yes. Marginalized groups will be lost. Yes. The actions of one affects the health of many. Yes. Yes. I will just simply say also more deaths. As simple as that in many ways. What did I miss? Individual isolation. Yes. Not enough control, not enough, I would say not enough centralized control, not enough centralized, standardized controls. Laws, okay. Vulnerable people die, yeah, exactly. Timing of response to changes in science. Yeah. Phyllis, did you put timing of response to changes in science? Is that an underside of the centralized approach or the decentralized approach?
It was the centralized approach.
Okay. Okay. Anything else did I miss? Misappropriation. Okay, yeah, misappropriation of resources. I would also say, you know, too many mistakes and no accountability. All right, so let's pause with that, everyone. So let's take a look. Here we have, I know this is a little difficult to see. Let's see if I can get this into one page. All right, everybody. So what are you seeing when you see this in relation to the polarization that is going on in the US, Canada? I mean,
Canada.
Yeah. How are you seeing all of this for you to personally make some sense, to make some meaning of this whole situation? How are you personally impacted by seeing the ups and the downs of both sides, especially in relation to your preference?
Thank you. One of the things that is certainly part of the consideration here is the degree to which you trust the science that you actually. I don't mean in terms of bad actors. I'm not speaking about that. It's the extent to which you base your approach on the findings of the central authorities, the World Health Organization, people like that. Despite, and of course, there's examples of them having done U-turns. So it's the degree to which you place your response on that assumption as to whether you're for a central approach or a more local, more local decentralized approach.
Okay, can you, John, turn that into an action item? So let me, as you think about that, let me explain a little bit around what we mean by action items and red flags. So if we want healthy people and healthy systems and somewhat of a return to normal, whatever that might mean, that's predictably or presumably, that's what we all want. Both people on both spectrum want healthy people, healthy systems, and a return to somewhat of a normal. What nobody wants is likely an ongoing issue of sick people, strained systems, more polarization, and also kind of loss of economy. Nobody wants to continue to lose their jobs and lose their businesses, right? So when we feel that we are falling too much into one side of the pole, let's say we're getting too much into one side of the pole, what is an action item that a system, if you were the leader of your city, for example, what is an action item you can take to make sure that you're upholding the good side of the centralized approach? What's an action item you can take to make sure that you're not falling to the underbelly of the downside? So anybody want to,
so I keep hearing that the 3 places that people get sick are indoor restaurants, indoor bars, and indoor parties at private homes.
Okay.
And so I would ban all of those things, but hopefully nothing else.
Okay, ban indoor gathering.
High risk things.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Good. So I'm not gonna, like, we don't have to do this right away, but I want to come back to John and just check in with John. John, in relation to what you shared, do you see what you shared as, can you rephrase that as an action that we can take?
Short answer is no.
Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, we'll just.
I generated a bit of a brain freeze for myself.
Okay, that's all right. Let's go to.
Can I, in terms of what John shared, something came up for me that I don't know which, it kind of goes on both sides, and that is this willingness of disclosure. Because in a centralized approach, the assumption is the WHO, or in the US, it's Fauci, is honest, open, and thorough, and so their statements are based on fact. So, but both sides, I think the action is a willingness to openness and disclosure.
Disclosure, yeah, and I think that is on both sides for sure. The problem, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you for that. That's helped to clarify. At the individual level, I don't think you have, it's hard to skirt around the need for you to do really a lot of homework, because you cannot really trust in a childlike fashion without doing your own work and your own investigation, anything really that you hear from at any level.
Yeah.
If you're actually going to take real personal, I'm talking about at the personal level, at the collective level, then along the lines of what I've just been saying, we have to, and the lack of trust in the sources of information, the sources of news. I don't know what to suggest there.
Yeah. Good. No, all good. I'm gonna also just give you
disclosure for the decentralized side and the individual. I also see it as you have a responsibility if you are infected. And
yes.
So I see it as a disclosure as really broad. Thanks.
Yeah. Totally. Responsibility. I'll just say be responsible. I know that's a very simple way of saying that, but just so you know that that's an action item we can all take. And then there are red flags. I just want to also quickly mention what we mean by red flags that need to be on the bottom. So we need warning systems to alert us when we are falling to the downside of either of those approaches. So for example, in the decentralized approach, while we are advocating for individual freedoms and rights and giving more freedom to individuals, a red flag could be there's a lot of confusing data coming out maybe, but also that there's an increase in infections. It's like real simple thing to notice is, wait a minute, we're offering a lot of freedom to you, but then in our city or in our town, the infections rate is going up rapidly. That is scientific data we can actually measure, we can actually see that. What is a red flag on the downside of the centralized approach?
So one thing that I'm interested in sharing is I'm going to say something like mass disruption, and I want to explain that. If someone tells me the truth for the 30 or 40 years, I believe in the truth of that relationship, and then they tell a lie, I'm questioning if there's 40 years of lies versus just one lie. So the openness and disclosure, when you make a mistake about something, and there's a life of trust. For me, that just says, okay, all bets are off.
Okay.
You need to leave.
So I could see that as a red flag on the centralized approach. The bottom is broken trust. And
broken trust, but then I guess the whole thing is it contaminates everything. Instead of it saying, well, okay, wait, they just made one mistake in one thing. Calm down. Don't go crazy. Yeah. Okay, let's pause on the actions and the red flags. You can all share if you feel like it on the chat field as well as an action item or a red flag. But let's go to Simone.
Okay, yes. So your first question was about how does it feel to see the whole map?
Yes. Yeah.
So first, it's always very, very healthy to see that what I call reality is actually a preference. So I have the preference on the decentralized approach. This makes me more humble and relaxed too. But the third step is also that I would love to have a government which claims to be a democratic, I'm talking here in Italy, of course, to be able to hold the entire map. Okay, so in terms of this type of wisdom, it took for us just 1 hour. It would be lovely to see that this is the whole thing. Okay, because just quick add-ons on what you said, the increased infections here in Italy now. We know on mainstream media that we have been counting in the wrong way for the entire 2 years. And it's not some heretic saying these things, the actual mainstream doctors. So talking about trust. And again, on the downside of the centralized approach here, there are also more subtlety too. For example, how to measure the demonization of the non-mainstream views. Okay. So my 3 points: safe detachment, reality, my preference. I can no problems of determining my preference. Makes me more humble, but I really claim for a democratic government I really wish for a democratic government to embrace the whole thing. Yeah, exactly. And what's happening around the world is that everybody is taking the preferred approach, without realizing also that even in polarity management, even if you have this full map in front of us, we do, given a context, we do need to alternate sometimes. So when infections are going up, we might have to agree to go to a centralized solution at that time, the centralized site. Let's go way up on the centralized approach, ban those indoors gatherings, as Mark was saying. And, if people see this, then even the people who prefer the decentralized approach are then educated that there's a red flag here of increased infections. Therefore, please, let's ban all these indoor gatherings. Can you wait? Can you have patience for that? For a given time, right? Thank you, Simone. Lots of good insights. Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Can we say that it could be a healthy or maybe wise trick to let people supporting, for example, the centralized approach, pick up the actions of that approach and pick up the downside of the other one?
See what you mean. Be responsible, be accountable for, if you get fixated on the centralized approach and then you see that there is a trust in broken systems, then can you be accountable? Can you be willing to take responsibility for that?
Yes, because I accept that I am biased. But let's profit from that bias. I can see more easily the downside of your preference, and you can do the other way around.
Yeah,
that could be a nice agreement.
Exactly. And Simone, now you're talking about development. If there is no integral levels of development, chances are, unfortunately, none of this works in a sense, because people aren't willing to actually take that higher perspective of, okay, I'm taking responsibility for my decision, right? Yeah, very good. Phyllis.
Simone, I love the last thing that you said, and it was pretty much what I was thinking, that I'm looking at this map and I'm going, there are, my bias is the more centralized approach, but when I really think about it, so many of my values are expressed in a decentralized approach. Now that I'm really looking at it, but I still know that there's a reason why in this instance, for me, my bias is the centralized approach. And to me, the beauty of looking at this in the first action step that I was thinking about it is really look at it and see where the commonalities are, and maybe see how, they can, how if they're integrated, and if they're that perhaps we can find some real action items that can really, bring the polarities more aligned.
Yeah, beautiful. Absolutely. I look at the commonalities as action items for both sides. Those are called superior action items because they're actually action items both sides need to take. Thank you, Phyllis. Very good. Let's go to John.
Thank you, Bob. I'm beginning to, I think it might be significant to just bring in the word triggered. We've spoken in terms of, bias and so forth and so on, but it occurs to me again through my own experience out in the street and around about in my own society that, in terms of how people are expressing at the level, handling with the fundamental fears that are associated with all of this, whatever your position, there's inevitably fear associated there. There's a tendency for people to be, and I'm responding actually to what you were just finished saying, Namali, about it's a developmental thing, and that people are not necessarily even fully aware of the fact that they are being triggered. And for me, that's different to a bias. Trigger for me is, what in order for resolution, there has to be somehow some safety into, like to have a conversation as opposed to an argument. Some degree of sense of safety has to be reestablished.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't see any indication of that on the big scale.
Yeah.
So clearly, the triggering, which is prone to more violence, it's prone to more staying in your bubble and just bad mouthing the other. It's not just about you being biased.
Yeah. So I think an action item I can see for both sides on that is if you feel that you're in your own bubble and you're not talking to someone from the other side, then pay attention to that. If you're only watching the same news outlet, for example, pay attention to that. That's a red flag. Perhaps you can diversify your news outlets. And that's good for both sides. So I'd love to hear from some of you that we haven't heard from. Anyone want to share around your own country situation, perhaps your own personal evolution around this whole thing? Eric, yeah?
Yeah, the thing that I'm wondering how to factor into all of this is disinformation. So, what we're laying out in this map, I'm very comfortable with that and the different values and so forth. But there's another factor when there's a lot of disinformation. So what John was just referencing, the people in the streets and the fear, I think a lot of times there are, programs to undermine societies. This is geopolitical kind of stuff. And that it's intentionally creating more fear and intentionally injecting a lot of disinformation that individuals are not really well equipped to process. And so, doing one's own research often leads to things that are, appreciated for their heterodoxy, but not necessarily very sound in their argument. And I don't know, how do we bring that kind of concern into all of this? So like the suggestion, I'm very interested in looking at different points of view, different news sources, but there's some things that I just put outside the pale. It's like, this is just pure BS. I'm not interested. And so how to draw those lines is kind of a curiosity for me.
Yeah. Anyone have any responses to Eric about that before we go to Helen and Cheryl?
So yeah, it's interesting with regards to finding your own sources, and then ideally small steps, not making big leaps to say, oh, well, because this, then that, right? to doing very, very incremental tests and then incremental shifts or changes. And I say that because I'm close to Ottawa, and trying to figure out, okay, everybody's got their positions on things. It's like, okay, well, I'm very confused what the actual truth is. Like it's overwhelming. My own personal, and I don't like overwhelm. I don't think many people like overwhelm. So how do you return to some sort of balance without breaking or shutting down?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, Eric, I wish I had something smarter to say, but it's almost, this is really difficult. Like the misinformation, the disinformation, it does have to do with the key theme of media, as I was saying, the heterodoxy or the alternative views, and the orthodox or the mainstream views. And this is also where development is in play. You know, who's putting what developmental level is putting out the information? Really hard. I mean, I think it's beyond the pay grade of potentially all of us here. But thank you for sharing the complex issues, Eric. Absolutely. Thank you. Let's go to Helen.
So all through this, I've been sort of seeing how governments are responding to the new bits of information in the pandemic, and it's required being able to look at that meta level, as we've been talking about. There are compelling arguments on both sides of so many of the issues with this, and it really requires being flexible, adaptable, agile. Now, my background is public sector. I've worked 40 years in the public sector. They are not the skills that the public sector have. And, I've seen new messages, new key messages happening. Suddenly they're happening worldwide. And they're all going off this, best practice. Let's adopt the best practice that somewhere else has. And that might be right for that particular place, but not the one that you're in. So I felt a lot of compassion for my ex-peers in trying to stay on top of this. But as we've been talking about, they need to be able to take this kind of more meta level that encompasses everything that we've come up with today, and constantly be prepared to listen to dissenting arguments and take them into account. I'm confident they're doing it to a certain extent, but as I say, these are not skills that are ingrained in the people who are making the decisions. And we are in such a manipulative society now, where information has been weaponized, where influence and others are huge. So anyway, I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah. I mean, totally, completely valid point. And you're in Australia, and we've been watching a little bit about how Australia and New Zealand have handled the whole thing. And in some ways, anyway, I'm not going to comment on that. But what I might offer to that is the question or the idea that I offered earlier around context and timing. So is there a way in which we can privilege one end of the solution or of the pole, and have some patience around that, given some kind of measurable data that is out there? It's hard to do that because we all have a preferred pole, and we will tolerate the downside of that preferred pole because we fear the downsides of the other pole more. So I think when we do feel that the other side is going crazy, one way to look at it is it going crazy? Perhaps, but can I have a little patience around it, because perhaps they're trying to figure out what is best given the data that is coming out. So, yeah.
Yeah, see if I can remember exactly what it was that I did want to say, but it just is relating to the fact largely that, I'm here in Canada, and I had a view of this country that's being somewhat shattered. right now, and where it was a relatively easy thing for me to do, to look from the outside and say, oh yeah, you have to look at each side and be open to all of the various opinions. I'm finding it a lot harder when I'm actually in the midst of it, and I'm seeing, family members or friends posting things that are, rather opposed to what I think, or what I think is going to be what's going to get us out of this. So it's just, I just want to say that being in the midst of it is an awful lot harder than the academic exercise of trying to work your way through this. And I wanted to presence that I have a lot more sympathy, let's put it this way, and empathy with my American friends here. It's hard. Like I can feel the resistance in me when I see somebody posting something that's very supportive of the truckers here right now. I don't want to read it. It's not, like I know I should, but I don't want to.
Yeah. And I think, Cheryl, I think this is true for each one of you. I want all of us to take this to heart. You do have to create your own polarity at that time, paying attention to the news and taking care of myself. Paying attention to the news and paying attention to myself. So when you pay attention too much at a certain point, our mental health will be in jeopardy. And when you realize that, you have to take a break. You have to be safe and do whatever is right for you and take care of yourself. I still check the news online and all that, but there are certain times when I'm just not going to look at the news, because at the end of the day, I think as individuals in a whole of wholes and parts, right? We are a whole unto ourselves at a certain time. So we can pay attention to what's going on around us when we are a part of society, but also we have to pay attention to what we need as a whole unto oneself. So please, everybody, at a certain point, do take care of your physical and mental health and do what is necessary for your well-being, and screw everything else. That's a part of polarity as well. I know there are 3 of your hands up. I will come back to you, but I just want to make another effort to see if I can encourage some of the less heard voices to be heard. So anyone else? Andrew, Jim, yes, I see Jim's hand going up. Thank you, Jim. And thanks for your patience, Phyllis, Simone, and Finn.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't mind if someone else wants to share. I may not have anything to add of great note, but I think what you said about information and then disinformation in news and media, Father Richard told us, and I hadn't watched the news for years, because he told us in 2017, that's Father Richard Rohr, if it makes you mad, turn it off, because they're so-and-so, right or left. But before that, 18 minutes of CNN and 50 minutes of Fox. And I thought maybe I could get like in the middle and get, kind of, and it's kind of like, wow, they are selling soap. He was right. So I turned it off for about 5 years until Afghanistan. And then I'd actually record 15 minutes of the headline news and watch both newses. And it's like, so during the pandemic, I went to the CDC and got the information myself and started looking into it. So it's really a lot of work, but it made me feel better that they all have their truth, or maybe that's Ken Wilber, right? They all have their truth, but it depends on their level or perspective or altitude. And then you either have to weigh it or turn it off. So I appreciate you saying that, Namali, because sometimes it's hard to do that in your own household and keep the peace. And even like brothers and sisters, I love them dearly, but early on, anyway, too much information. But thank you for saying that, because it is very polarizing in southeastern Indiana.
Yeah, so 2 things I want to quickly add to what Jim said around, if something is destructive, turn it off. And that there's truth in that. That's what I was basically saying. And I want to tie that to what John said earlier around triggers. We also want to pay attention to how I am triggered by the other pole or by the other perspective. And do I have to do some shadow work around that? Complexity never ends. So yeah. Okay. So hold on. So does Hardy Levi, Adrian, Jolene, do we have, I see Levi's hand going up and also Hardy after that. Yes, Levi.
Yeah, for me, I was really angry about, you know, the whole Joe Rogan conversation. I don't know if you know about it. That he was called that he was spreading misinformation, and in order to make a buck, you know, to make money, basically he was demonized as being an evil capitalist, doing it all for the money and creating shock effects by hosting controversial podcasts. So for me, normally I would kind of ignore these kind of conversations on Facebook, but this time I thought perhaps it is good to at least engage and to just be careful, not go too much, not too much emotion, or but at least engage. And then because I know Joe Rogan pretty well, so some of the demonization I would say was not correct. So I would just very carefully say something and then pull back and then see whether it was how it gets received. And sometimes I would get a very angry response, or for me I got very angry about the response, but it was still I think good that at least because normally I would just say, well, I just turn it off completely. And sometimes that's best because like I don't understand mRNA vaccines at all. So that's a discussion I shouldn't enter. But in this case, I thought, no, I'm a big fan and they're really doing something. Yeah, I can really add something. So then I should do it. Then I should carefully, but I should, yeah.
Yeah, using your voice as you see fit. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that whole thing. I mean, there are some system breakdowns going on, and sometimes I get angry with my friend Jeff Salzman, for example, because he's so positive about everything, and I'm like, dude, there are some things that are just like falling all over the place. Like, and this in some ways has to do with the powerlessness that some of us might feel around disinformation, that this is what Eric was talking about earlier, where we really feel like, I don't know what to do. It's and so but we do need to speak up towards our preferred pole in the way that feels authentic, and also give voice or really pay attention to the other views as well. I mean, are we just canceling people needlessly, or how are these systems really falling apart? Let's go to Hardy. Thanks, Levi. Hardy?
Yeah, regarding the polarity between centralized and decentralized approaches, what comes up for me is to very specifically even ask the question, what aspects of the pandemic are best handled in a more centralized way, and what aspects of the pandemic are best handled in a decentralized way? Mm-hmm. In my work in community development, if we had to go through this all over again, what I would wish for every neighborhood is that the neighbors have access to a list of each other's email addresses and phone numbers, so that when some of the everyday needs, concerns related to mental health and even food and otherwise, there are so many things that can be handled at a neighborhood level that we then wouldn't be looking to the government to try to have to solve all of those kinds of situations. And it would probably also create the government could do better at what it should be doing if it didn't have, all of the complaints of everything that's wrong with our neighborhood going in that way. And so, that's just another aspect of it that comes to mind that could bring us all together into an overall more healthy situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Thank you, Hardy. Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to appreciate the scope, the presentation. It was really really useful, really opening for me to see this real big meta perspective, and the presentation. It was quite wonderful. Oh, I just appreciate the the group. I appreciate you, Namali. You're
Thank you.
brilliant.
Thank you, Jolene. Yeah, thank you so much.
A quick consideration on the whole map. I also feel that there is, let's say, in a visual manner, there is also a circle around that 4 quadrants, meaning there is a general context, the ingredients of what I could call the crisis mode, where we are now, are scarcity, for example, in terms in Italy of ICU, I think you call ICU, the urgency, of course, the speed of contagion, and also the importance, life or death situations. So this puts all of us in all 4 quadrants in terms of mindset, health, policies, but also language. I've been hearing the language of division from our very top level leaders, political leaders, and also cultural wars. So just a quick consideration, in my job as a corporate trainer, for example, I've been teaching and learning the famous 4 quadrants of time management, where you have urgency and importance. And you know that you can fall into the crisis mode, not just because things that are unforeseen happen, but also because out of your incompetency, for example. Okay, so I'm just highlight here also that we can also profit from this pandemic and say to us, to our governments, local, global, whatever, that crisis mode, we know now that can just happen, can also made it up. You can make it up because there are also some controversies, and it also can happen out of incompetence. So we now are in the position to already think about to train a little bit more our foresight abilities. Okay, because in Italy this has been a huge debate. The national pandemic plan was outdated. In our pandemic plan coming from, I think, 2004. It was there, and there was someone saying, "Hey, hello, sooner or later something is going to happen," and nobody did anything. So the general context of the crisis mode is something that we can also address and say, do not use that as an excuse or as the justification to do all the other things. I don't know if this makes sense and if this has added something interesting to the debate.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, thank you, Simone. Big stuff. Yes. Oh, okay. And John sends a message saying Phyllis can go first because it's only 6:45 in the UK. Very good. Phyllis, yeah. Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. This actually harkens back to what Eric was talking about, and to the truth. And I believe I haven't heard anyone speaking about sort of the gestalt of the existential fear that everybody is coming from and everybody is hearing the truth from, you know? And I think that when one is in that sort of existential, overwhelming panic, I mean, we were just looking at one piece of what's going on in the world right now. And there are so many pieces that are at least that complicated, and they're all coming at us. And when someone's afraid, I believe that their tendency is to hear and to hold on to whatever they can hold on to that's going to give them some sense of comfort and stability. And that's different for everybody. So I don't know how to address that, but I think that the truth, when you're considering the truth and why and how people see things the way that they do, that's something that needs to be taken into consideration, how skewed I believe many of us are by this overwhelm and this need for something to hang on to. Even though I know we all talk about, like non-attachment but when you're scared, you want a lifeboat, and anything that seems that to you, you're going to take as real.
Yeah, absolutely. Really important. We're all in the same ocean, but we're not all in the same boat. So we all have different needs. Some of us have been able to take cruise ships during the pandemic, you know, and in the same ocean, for some of us, it's a tiny little lifeboat that we're trying to survive in, you know. So that as you said, the gestalt of the existential reality of everything, it's a very different felt sense for everybody. So I'm glad that you spoke about it, because what I might offer to that, as someone who is also kind of learning and you know, learning a lot about trauma, every side has a fear that is potentially based in a childhood trauma, you know. And I think that sometimes at the very least, there are two basic, in attachment theory, sometimes we talk about two very basic fears that we all have. One, some of us will have the basic fear of abandonment, started at a very early age. Others have a very basic fear of engulfment, like encroaching, don't like leave, like give me some room here to breathe, you know, like you're helicopter parenting me, too much, give me room. These two fears are really real. That for some of us, it's like, you're abandoning me. You're not, you know, when you don't get your vaccine and my life is in danger, or my mom's life is in danger, or whatever, you're abandoning me. You're not caring about me. You're abandoning me, that I could die. I have a compromised immune system. When you don't abide by the centralized approach, you're abandoning me. Right? That's a true fear. And then for some of us who might have the fear of, and I mostly personally, I can just be very open about the fact that for most part in any issues of life, I mostly have the fear of abandonment. But I know people who have the fear of engulfment. And they're like, don't put all these rules and forcing me to do things. And it's really aggravating, and I'm getting triggered, and all my fears of being controlled are exacerbated and triggered, and I'm going into panic because I'm shoved into a corner and I'm forced to do things I don't want to do. That's the fear. That's the existential fear for those who have the fear of engulfment. And they are falling along the individual rights side and the collective common good side, right? It's so sad in a way, what this human journey that we have to make, and the ways in which we're just ultimately just human, and how much respect we have to have for these existential fears that we have. And it's just a great way to practice some compassion, but also personal self-care. Let me go to Stephanie, and then we'll go to Finn. Stephanie, yes.
This is just really fast. This is what, for me, has been sitting the whole discussion, and that's the level of trust. Mm-hmm. Because I believe in the centralized piece of it and the balance of the decentralized, but it gets down to, do you trust what you're hearing? Yeah. And as somebody who's done, a lot of investigate, like when I look at something in research, I don't ever look at the executive summary. Mm-hmm. I look at the actual results, because you can put whatever you want in the executive summary to mislead. And so for me, the basis of all of this is, do I trust what I hear or don't I? Yeah. And how do I find the element to say, okay, I can breathe, I can exhale and know that this is good. So I don't know how to deal with that's, to me, my I don't know if that's the paradox of trust or not trust, but
yeah, trust and curiosity in a way. Yeah, that's the polarity there. It's like, I want to be able to trust, and I also want to remain curious. This is like these crazy polarities, they're everywhere, Stephanie. Right? Yeah. Good. And then Finn, and then John.